Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take yet another look at Saturn's upcoming entrance into the sign of Aries. This time we are going to look at it from a psychological perspective. I'm going to be sharing a few of the really poignant thoughts from Liz Greene's book called Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil. There are just a few little pieces of a section of the book dedicated to Saturn and Aries that I'm going to pull from today. And then I have a list of things to watch for in terms of the kinds of experiences we are likely to have emotionally, psychologically, mentally, while Saturn is in Aries over the next couple of years. I think that this is important to do, to look at a planet from several different paradigms within astrology. The evolutionary paradigm, not that I perfectly represented it in our video yesterday, but looking at it from that standpoint of what is the soul here to learn and how is it going to grow along the timeline of Saturn and Aries. Today, let's look at the most likely themes that are going to come up emotionally, psychologically, internally, in terms of this upcoming transit. We did some horoscopes already, so today we'll be looking at Saturn from a psychological perspective. We'll just be giving you some themes to watch for. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be looking at the major transits coming in over the weekend. We've got a Sun trine to Pluto while Mercury and Uranus are conjoining. So we'll round off the week tomorrow by looking at that. Today, a little bit more on Saturn's entrance into Aries. So before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. It really helps our channel to grow so much when people out there who watch regularly decide to give us the little subscription. Click the little subscription button, helps us a lot. We want this to be a home for your daily spiritual practice with astrology. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. A bunch of cool events coming up at Nightlight. A bunch of them are also free. Go to the events page, click on in-person events. If you're in Minneapolis, St. Paul, we are holding a summer solstice gathering at the Grapevine Collective in Minneapolis on June 21st from 6 to 8:30 p.m. We'll be doing a little meditation time together and just some time for community as well. It's free to attend. Just make sure we know that you're coming. Click the RSVP button. Go to the events page, click on speaker series. You'll see that our free seasonal speaker series talks are coming up in June. Free to attend. Just register. We'll give you the link. If you can't attend, you get the replay afterward. So check those out. Some great speakers coming up, giving talks that are really suitable for students of all levels. So check those topics out there. And then go to the events page, click on live talks, and you'll see my June webinar on June 19th is going to be focusing on Uranus and Gemini trine Pluto in Aquarius. I've titled the talk When New Objects Appear in the Sky. I think you guys will really enjoy that one. A lot of research on the upcoming Uranus-Pluto trine that I'll be presenting in that talk. We'll look at some instances of historical trines between those two planets. Go to courses, click on first year course, and you will see that we are in enrollment season. June 22nd is the next first year program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. At the end of today's video, you'll find an informational video telling you all that you need to know about the program. And at the bottom of the page here, you'll find the payment options for registration, as well as tuition assistance. So if you're someone who needs a little bit of help to make the program happen, please do take advantage of that. It offers you a sliding scale within which to set your own price. We make sure that that's available for people who might be hurting financially or just on a really tight, limited income. I don't think that astrology should be set aside for just one, socioeconomic bracket. So that's kind of a part of our mission here for a long time at Nightlight, and it is the success of the Kickstarter supporting the channel every year that allows us to make sure that that pricing is really available for everything we do. You can also find if you haven't ever checked it out, you can see that we have an affordable reading service on the website as well. Go to book a reading, check out the affordable tiers of pricing that we have. You can get a reading with one of our alumni or one of our staff, and offering a range of flexible pricing there to get a reading as well. So, okay, I apologize. My voice is a little hoarse as I'm recording this. I am just back from seeing the Timberwolves clinch the series against the Golden State Warriors here in Minneapolis last night. So my voice is a little hoarse, but that was super fun. That was super fun. I'd been to 9 Minnesota sports teams playoff games and never seen a win. So Minnesota will take what we can get. Anyway, so today, let's refresh on the transit. We have been looking at this pretty much all week, of course, because it is a huge thing when any slow-moving outer planet changes signs. We're looking at Saturn moving into the sign of Aries coming up here on Sunday. Saturday into Sunday. So let's put it up on the screen. Here you can see Sunday, May 25th. By early morning, Saturn has entered Aries. It's technically late Saturday night, the 24th into the 25th, depending on your time zone. But we've been looking at this all week from a variety of perspectives. So I hope that you have found the content thus far rewarding and enriching. I am today going to share just a few little thoughts from Liz Greene, who is really the great, I would say, the great master of modern psychological astrology. Without her, so much of modern astrology wouldn't be what it is. She is a hero to me on an intellectual level, and just someone that I've modeled a lot of my work and practice after. Never met her, never studied under her personally, but I've read her entire library of works, have them all in my closet. And I think if you haven't read her, that you ought to. All right, so you'll see that occasionally I draw from her texts for inspiration, James Hillman being my other main homie that I often draw on in these presentations. So anyway, the book today is Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil by Liz Greene. Go pick up a copy. You can get it on Amazon. I know for sure it's on Amazon. Maybe there's another place you can pick it up too, but that's the one that comes to my mind right away. Now, the portion of the book where she takes Saturn through the signs is really interesting. She conflates signs with houses in the way that is typical of modern astrology. Hellenistic astrologers don't do that. We've discovered really since the publication of many of the ancient texts in the English language, which happens kind of like the 80s, 90s, progressively, that there was likely a very, very different rationale behind the meaning of the houses than the idea that they take their meaning from the signs. So all of that is just to say that if you read this text and you're a Hellenistic student, you may notice that the way that houses and signs are talked about, they're conflated. We don't do that in Hellenistic astrology so much, but there's still so much to learn from this section and from all of her texts that I don't really think it's a big deal. Anyway, in this section, she says a few things, and I want to do two things today based on this section and some of the things that she says. I want to give you three things to watch for, given the psychological nature of Saturn and Aries. Now, often you'll see me go for five. When I was writing up my notes this morning for this presentation, I really felt like these three were the ones I wanted to go with. So 3 rather than 5, just live with it. Oh, anyway, and then as I go, I want to remind you of the last time that Saturn was in Aries and give you some prompts or some ideas of how you could look at these themes relative to the last time Saturn was in Aries if you were around back then. Some of you who are coming up on your first Saturn return or just had one may not even remember this period of time. It was very vivid for me because I'm, turning 44 this summer. So I was old enough to have a very rich Saturn in Aries experience the last time around. So as I go through these themes and through a few little excerpts from Liz Greene's book, I'm going to reflect on that period of time in my life and how these themes that she mentioned psychologically were active. And I'll tell you kind of the prompts that I gave myself as I was writing the talk today that you could use as a way of reflecting upon the last time Saturn was in Aries if you choose to do so. So I hope you'll find this meaningful and, useful as always. So actually, before I read the section, I guess it would make sense. Sorry, I was kind of going backward here. Let's look at the last time Saturn was in Aries, just, for refresher. I'm going to take everything out of the chart right now, except for Saturn, so that the view is sort of simpler. And let's do that. Now let's go back to the last time that Saturn was in Aries. Okay, so Saturn was in Aries in 1995. Or no, sorry, we're in Pisces. So what I find so interesting is Saturn moves into Aries in about April of 1996. As soon as Saturn moves into Aries in 1996, we are in Saturn and Aries territory. Now, Saturn goes into Aries and retrogrades, but does not go back into Pisces as it will this time. So April of 96 is really the start of the Saturn and Aries journey. And then Saturn stays in the sign of Aries and doesn't enter Taurus until, here we go, back this up just a touch. about June of 1998. So April 96 to June 98. That's about 2 years. Now, Saturn's going to enter Taurus, and then Saturn is going to retrograde and dip back into Aries in October of 1998 and does not turn direct again and finally leave until March of 1999. So you can see how it's about 2.5 years if you add it all up. That's typical for Saturn per sign. So that period of time, spring of 96 through maybe spring of 99, looks like it's 3 years. Not all of that is Saturn in Aries, but it's a good enough timeline to work with, considering that you're in a process during that whole period that is reflective of the themes we're going to look at today. So that's the timeline that I looked at to reflect upon these themes in my own life. And I'll tell you kind of what I saw and just the brief arc of my own journey during that time. And then I would really love to hear from all of you in the comment section today. If you've got a good story to share, this is a great one for a grabbed episode. Tell us about what your Saturn and Aries experience was like last time around in the late 90s there. Use the hashtag grabbed, say Saturn and Aries 96, 97, whatever it was, and then tell us what you experienced. We'll grab some of those stories and we'll include them in a future storytelling episode. So, all right, let's talk about the psychological Saturn and Aries. These are some few brief ideas from Liz Greene to get us started. So Saturn, she says, is considered to be in his fall in Aries. And from this, one might deduce that this is a difficult position for him and one which is not easily carried. Possibly the most difficult side of it is the tendency to be cut off from both the flow of outer life and the flow of inner life, so that the individual is stranded in a very small and very arid area of his psyche, difficult to reach and unable to touch the mainspring of purpose and meaning, which would enable him to face the outer world with courage. But I am inclined to believe that planets in their fall, and Saturn in particular, can offer to the persistent and perceptive person a much greater key to the meaning of the planet, and therefore to the development of in life of the function which it symbolizes. I really love that take on planets in their fall. There's a whole rationale from the Hellenistic perspective about planets in their fall and exaltation, the opposites, that I won't get into today, but suffice it to say, you're not just doomed if you have a difficult placement. Those difficult placements have a kind of archetypal and philosophical rationale behind them, which has to do with the tension between planets. So why is Saturn in its fall in Aries? It really has to do with the placement of Saturn in the sign of the sun and the fact that the sun and Saturn are natural opposites. So we're placing Saturn, the Lord of darkness and winter, in the sign of spring and life. And I went through earlier this week the example of what Saturn might order if it were a guest at the B&B of Mars and the sun, and then what kind of things do the sun and Mars provide. And that dynamic shows you exactly why it can be a difficult placement. It's the tension between who Saturn is and what the sun and Mars as co-hosts of Aries have to provide for Saturn's own nature, the combination of which, as you can see from the exercise we went through earlier this week, can be very difficult. But that difficulty has value psychologically. It has value on an evolutionary level, which is why we're looking at it from these perspectives as well. So I like that she says that. Then she says, a planet in its fall must generally struggle, and if the struggle, which is carefully tended, yields insights, an eventual expansion of the field of consciousness. That I could not agree with more. But what are those struggles psychologically that lead to that evolutionary potential? This is particularly true of Saturn, who, when placed in the sign of his fall, is often stripped of the courage and confidence, the natural gifts of the Aryan, which is required to tackle the problems of living head on. Yet the thing he wants the most is the joy of being free, of being first, of exploring unknown regions and meeting unknown challenges and reveling in the innate realization that his existence is guarantee enough of his purpose. That's a lot. That's a really beautiful passage, in fact. It's the person with Saturn in Aries who, with effort, has the greatest possibility of achieving this kind of freedom. Saturn may overcompensate with this placement as much as with any other. Consequently, there are usually two distinct kinds of reactions to this struggle between the desire to challenge and experience life to the fullest and the fear of being hurt, dominated, and crushed by the forces of a hostile environment. The person who eventually perpetually effaces themselves to avoid a struggle and who backs away from those situations which might call for strength, aggressiveness, or direct confrontation expresses one kind of unconscious Saturnian reaction. He often has no temper and rarely displays anger, but this can be very hard on the physical body because the natural tendency toward irritability is turned inward against oneself. This position is often connected with symptoms of a psychosomatic kind, such as migraine headaches, which are often linked with unexpressed anger and frustration. The self-effacement of this expression of Saturn is not truly humility, but is rather a fear of entering the fight because of the inner certainty of losing it. There's often great emphasis on being unselfish. A favorite keynote of Saturn and Aries are in the first house, but to be unselfish, one must first have a self to give away. And the difficulty with this placement is that in the beginning, until the individual comes to terms with his fear, there is no real acceptance or expression of the self in the first place. Saturn in the first, or in this case, Aries, often feels that he is never able to have what he wants, that life is forever thwarting his desires. This is largely because he doesn't ask for what he wants, or if they do ask, then it is with the concurrent feeling that they do not actually deserve a reply. So you can see how much of this has to do with self-worth, confidence, the fear that we're not worthy or capable, or that there's conflicts in front of us that we will lose. And so we may choose self-effacement or diplomacy or what we think of as peace or humility, when actually they're just ways of avoiding things, confrontations, tests of our mettle somehow that we're afraid to face. I love that she's mentioning this because this was very true of my experiences in the late 90s as I reflected upon it. I'll say more about that in a second. The will and use of the will are often frightening to the individual because they are afraid of their own will and consequently projects what they term willfulness or selfishness onto others. That's fascinating, isn't it? As they come to terms with this shadowy and powerful aspect of their own personality, I guess of our own, as we're all listening to this, for the person with Saturn placed here has a powerful and controlled will if they choose to recognize and utilize it. They generally find that along with their frustration, they have also learned control over desire nature, has shaped their personality into a disciplined tool. Although Saturn is in his fall in Aries, Mars is exalted in Capricorn, and the energy is similar with both these positions. The controlled and directed will, coupled with a sense of purpose, is one of the more positive qualities offered by Saturn in Aries. But we have to cultivate it. We have to build it. That's the point she's making. And that will often involve confronting things that we're afraid of within ourselves or with the general direction or use of will or aggression or assertiveness or confidence or competition. Sometimes those qualities are necessary. Sometimes we have to lean into them, even if we would like to write them off with some kind of moral position, like, well, to be assertive is immoral or something like that. At the opposite end of the spectrum, the more aggressive manifestation of Saturn in Aries often appears, and this individual may be at first glance rarely distinguishable from the truly fiery type of temperament. No one is more outgoing than they, no one more prepared to take charge or seize control of a situation, either through sheer force or more subtle calculation. Their philosophy is the best defense is offense. It has not yet occurred to them that it is possible to control oneself without the necessity of controlling everybody else. So it's interesting to think about the opposite end of the spectrum where Saturn and Aries can bring forth the problems that we have with self-control and a tendency to be domineering or bullying or just too aggressive. She closes with this: the use of will is something available to every human being, but it grows in proportion to one's self-knowledge and self-mastery. That might as well be the mantra for this transit. The use of the will is something available to every human being, but it grows in proportion to one's self-knowledge and self-mastery. I feel, as someone who almost daily studies the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching and the Taoist philosophical tradition has been a very meaningful part of my own, kind of private personal development. That is a teaching that is repeated over and over and over and over again. Real power, real effectiveness in the world comes through the ability to understand, acknowledge, work with, live with our feelings, our impulses, our will, but to be able to let them, to be a channel for them, and with some ability to direct them rather than being governed by them, rather than being completely taken over by these energies and forces that flow through us. Very like Jedi training, you know. So the person who has achieved a degree of psychic integration is far better equipped to cope with life because they are generally aware of the purpose of life in a broad sense, and also more aware of the energies which they can utilize from within to carve out a little piece of life for themselves. Saturn in Aries tends to emphasize the fear of powerlessness because it suggests a clinging to the more superficial features of the personality and a consequent loss of contact with the rich inner person. Eventually, this fear can prod the individual into a deeper exploration of what they consider to be identity. So I'll close there. Some really cool thoughts from Liz Greene. And just to, anytime I read something from another author, it is always with the intention to also promote their work. So go pick up this book. It's fantastic. I couldn't recommend it more highly. And sometimes I feel like the best content is to point to the masters. You know, where have I gotten a lot of my ideas, my learning, my education from? Liz Greene, you know, Richard Tarnas, a lot of others too. But and you'll be enriched as well if you take some time with Liz Greene's work, all of her work, and her webinars and everything else she does. So now, in terms of the 3 takeaways that I took from this, number 1, the tendency for Saturn in Aries to present us internally with the feeling that we are cut off from the flow of life, or the energy of life that is creative, potent, powerful, empowering, that enthusiasm. The word etymologically comes, you break it apart, en theos, the God within. There's a powerful level of freedom and passion and enthusiasm and charisma and spirit when we are in touch with that flow of life, when we feel as though we're an instrument for the expression of life in the cosmos itself. And to fear being cut off from that, or to feel like someone or something is telling us you're not worthy of being in touch with that force, that's a really difficult theme that comes up with Saturn in Aries, but it is a theme that is meant to be confronted. It's a theme that's meant to be heroically faced, overcome. So I was looking back at the late 90s. The month that Saturn entered Aries, my dad gave us the news that we were moving from my beloved small hometown, where I was an integrated member of the social community, from the church that I attended as a preacher's kid to my school, my grade, my sports teams, I was in theater, like music. Like I had a sense of who I was, and I felt very connected to the flow of life. I'm a part of the flow of life in this little ecosystem. Now we're moving. Now, of course, Saturn's in my 12th house as a Taurus rising during this time, but it was an immediate sense of being cut away from the flow of life, and being cut away from a sense of that there's this powerful thing called life that's happening, and it has this broad sense of being purposeful. I wasn't the most popular kid in the world, but I kind of knew who I was and where I was. During the next couple of years, while Saturn was in Aries, I went into an experience of being a loner, of being becoming sort of antisocial, of going through some pretty serious bullying events. And then ultimately, I'll tell you more about the arc of that story. But if I had to describe how I felt in that first year, especially the first few months, it was, I'm being cut off from everything that makes me feel most free and alive. I'm suddenly being like a caged animal that can't be free. And there's nothing, if you've, like, we have a puppy right now, man, does a little puppy coming right into the world not understand crate training right away? You got to make that crate feel very safe, very comfortable, have them eat their food in the crate, and then they get used to it. And then it's like, okay, this is my little den. But initially, when you put an animal in a cage, and it's used to freedom, boy, it will completely flip out. So that's why there's a lot of sensitivity around crate training, right? You ever gone to a shelter, and you see, we've had a number of rescues throughout our life. Ashley and I, throughout our marriage, I should say, when you go see the rescues and you see them and how sad and depressed they are, how their spirit looks like it's been killed. Animals will chew off their own paws if they're caught in a trap out in the wild. Um, so being cut off from what makes us feel alive, circumstances changing, so that suddenly we have to find that connection in what feels like a space of isolation or oppression. That's a hard task. That's why Saturn is in its fall in Aries. However, could you think of a more heroic setup for a story of transformation? And I will tell you, these years, although they were easily the hardest in my adolescence, also because of a lot of other things that were happening in my family, there was infidelity, and it was like my dad was sort of starting down a path of sort of evolving in his spirituality, but leaving the church, all of which was very confusing for me. I've written about that very publicly, spoken about it publicly before. But there was a feeling that life as I knew it and what connected me to a feeling of power and purpose. Not power as in I'm powerful, but power as in there's something enlivening about life. It's an exciting place to live and be. That was taken away. And again, the image of a cage kind of comes up. And then the question becomes, how do you find that within this space of oppression or confinement? And there's lots of ways to do that, but that becomes a really important dynamic. Now, I experienced this mostly psychologically. My basic needs were cared for. I wasn't in any great danger. The bullying was extreme in some moments, but I survived. But the underlying current was like, man, I felt like I was in a strong, good flow, and then something comes in and just feels like it's trying to knock you off your horse. So that becomes a really important theme. All right, let's move on to number 2. Another thing that will happen with Saturn in Aries is that we feel within us a sense of being disempowered or trapped or stuck, or we feel cut off from that life force energy. It's as though Saturn sets up this barrier, and on one side is a feeling of flow, freedom, life, power, like spring energy, right? That's Aries and Mars and the sun. And on the other side of the wall is a feeling of being trapped, limited, disempowered. And it feels like a really strong dichotomy. So what we typically do with that, as Liz Greene was outlining, is go to one of two extremes. In order to cope with the feeling of not being powerful, creative, free, open, flowing, we will say to ourselves, well, that's selfish anyway. To be strong or powerful, those are egotistical motivations, not for me. Or the kind of confrontation with our own fears or our own sense of inadequacy, the courage required, the assertiveness required. We'll say, well, those are pushy, domineering, aggressive qualities, and I think of them as immoral or lacking in virtue, or there's something wrong with those things. So we can moralize to keep ourselves from the kind of conflict or the kind of confrontation or the kind of what the moment requires, so that we can, in a sense, return to a feeling of life and flow. So, on the other hand, some of us may be learning through Saturn in Aries the lesson of being too aggressive, too assertive, too domineering. It's as though for some people, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this won't be you. You're probably all very gentle, thoughtful people who are not domineering or bullying. But for those who are, the lessons can be pretty harsh. And by that, I mean, there can be a way that the ego gets checked and you get this very clear feedback that you're not going to succeed through will and force and power and bullying and domineering and pushing. You're going to be met with a kind of karmic consequence for that kind of behavior. And that's why you'll often see the rise of sort of like tyrannical figures, as well as the checking of those figures by the force of fate. Not that it's a guarantee that it always works like that, but you will see things like that happening while Saturn is in Aries. So On the one hand, we don't want to avoid struggle. On the other hand, we don't want to be too aggressive. There's a middle path where we learn to be strong but disciplined. We learn to be confident and assertive but not egotistical and domineering. And finding that middle line where the flow of life is located, not easy. It requires real work. And even if most of us are good at that day to day, when Saturn enters Aries, it's time to level up with that. You know, I think of it sometimes like this. When I was working with ayahuasca over the years, there would be spaces that would be really, really turbulent. And in the beginning, it's kind of like, when you're learning to ride a bicycle and you're like overcorrecting. And so you're just swerving back and forth. And then gradually your sensitivity to correcting kind of comes into the center. And so you're not going so crazy to the left and right, sort of, because you're learning you have to just correct more subtly. That process was one that really took place for me over 100 plus ceremonies with ayahuasca, where it was like, how do I handle the turbulence mentally, emotionally, even physically in my body, and the way I'm carrying the medicine during a ceremony? You'd be like, okay, first I'm wildly correcting, and then of course that was like coupled with like barfing all over, or screaming, or like all the purging, right? Good. It's good. Those spaces, whether you're doing it in meditation or psychedelic or whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is just that meditation is the same thing, right? You're learning not to correct so wildly, and then you come into the middle. And then what becomes really cool is as you get more into the middle, the same kind of wildness exists within a much subtler space. And so it keeps getting refined. And that, to me, is why it's important to always have a practice of meditation or quiet time in your life, because we're really learning how to be channels. And part of the way we learn how to be channels is how to let it flow through us. We're sort of guiding it and directing through us, but we're also just sort of getting out of the way. And to get out of the way is also a process of learning how to let something not be too afraid or too aggressive, too timid or too assertive. It's like you're just finding that sweet spot. Saturn in Aries will refine that for all of us, regardless of how much work we've already done on it already. So anyway, think about that. Now, when I was mapping this out in terms of the late 90s, the thing that I thought was really interesting was that for me, this was a huge part of the process. When I was a new kid in a new place, at first, I really was avoiding struggle and just hiding myself. And then the bullying came when I tried to assert myself, but a little too aggressively. I wasn't being a bully, but I was just trying to kind of like show myself or try to make myself be more seen or more a part of the social fabric of this new environment. And I was doing so in a way that was just a little over aggressive. Did that mean that I deserved being bullied? I don't think so. Of course not. That was really shitty of them. But nonetheless, the process was really instructive because I could see how, it's like I got to find somewhere in the middle here in terms of how to just assert myself into a new social situation. I remember very clearly that, initially being bullied, it was like, okay, let's just go back to hiding. Let me just go back to like being invisible. That's way easier. And then in that invisible space, I wrote a lot of poetry and just being totally honest, I'd write a lot of poetry. It was very angsty. I'd play my guitar. Everything was about writing off the people that I felt oppressed by, especially some of the ones that were being bullying, by moralizing or like putting them into categories, like, oh, well, they're jocks, or, oh, well, they're this, or, oh, well, they're that. And this allowed me to feel more comfortable in what was really hiding in fear. That's just me. I'm not saying everyone is like, this is just my process and how I've reflected on it. And so then, but I'm pretty honest with myself internally. Maybe it's my Cap Moon. I have a hard time hiding from myself anyway, most of the time. I said, no, like, this is BS. You're putting them into a bin that's really reflective of your fear. And so there were some instances written about some of these in my recent book, The Oracle Speaks. You can check that out on my website. It's under the shop page. So I'm releasing that book chapter by chapter. One of the chapters I was really more recently writing and reflecting on the bullying and how I chose to find some way of responding that was more meaningful. So I, it's a simple story from high school for me, but maybe you can relate in terms of what you find when you think back about the late 90s. If you know, if there was, like some of you may be too young, but it's a good time to look back at. How were you working with those tensions between, hiding in fear or, kind of being too much? So anyway, it was a very educational time for me in my life. Number 3, power, will, strength flowing through us. And I've kind of already said this, but let's say it again. There's, I think as the Taoist philosophy teaches us, and really watch Star Wars. It's really that simple. If you want a crash course on Taoist philosophy, when we recognize that strength, power, force, confidence, joy, just that carefree, easy feeling of vibrancy that Aries is so reflective of, the sun and Mars being their rulers, fire being its element, spring, light taking over in the year, that is just life force energy. And that's is why we sometimes think of the sign of Aries in terms of that phrase, I am. Liz Greene said it perfectly. She said that the best Aries is like, you have purpose simply because you exist, because you are alive. And that's such a simple, embodied sense of purpose that's less intellectual and ideological. And you have to go prove yourself to guarantee that this purpose is real. You have to make a certain amount of money or accomplish certain things or have certain skills. That's all bullshit to Aries. They're just being frank. This is what I love the most about all the Aries people in my life that I've ever known. If you really get to know people who have the strong Aries confidence that's not domineering, it's just simple. It's like, you exist, brah. Sorry. You exist. Like, you don't need anything else. You're good. Ride it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So can we find that flowing through us when circumstances try to make us feel like, well, you can't have it because this happened? No, you can have it because you exist, right? That's the test that we get. What a beautiful test, right? But not necessarily fun in all moments. Also, when we can identify this force as something flowing through us, can we become caretakers of it? Where does the Aries tendency toward activism, advocacy, guardianship, protecting things and people come from? It comes from the very basic sense that this vibrancy, this strength, this life, this force isn't mine. It flows through me. So I'm a steward of it. I am a guardian of it. I am a protector of it. I am. You can feel that. It's like the pulse behind Aries. So let it flow through, protect it, guard it, cherish it, but it's not yours. And what makes you powerful is the extent to which you're humble enough to realize it's not yours, because then you become a really effective instrument for its flow, right? So can we do that work? Can we find that? Little sermon from the stars today, right, guys? So one of the things that happened for me, I'll close off my high school story with this. I recognized that at a certain point, my struggle to assert myself into this space socially, and even though I did find kind of a happy medium where, okay, I passed through the test of the bullies, I asserted myself too strong, got this feedback of bullying energy, and so I went back to fear, and then I kind of figured out a happy medium. And then I'm not kidding when I say it clicked. All of a sudden I said, but what about, regardless of what these people think about me or how well adjusted or how much I fit in, what's the path of life that I want to take beyond high school, right? Because this was 10th, 11th, 12th grade for me around that time. It's like, where am I going with my life? What path do I want to blaze? What trail do I want to take? And having the courage to say, screw all of this. Not that I kind of graduated past condemning or putting people into bins that maybe I was really just afraid of, or, didn't like the tension of them being there, but just being like, what do I want? And I realized, oh, I want to study philosophy, because I was really super hungry for big questions. So I left high school and I went to community college. In Minnesota, there's a program where you can leave high school your 10th, 11th, 12th grade years. I ended up leaving my 11th grade and 12th grade years, going to community college and getting double credits for high school and those that would count toward a bachelor's degree. And the state pays for it here. It's incredible. So I said, this is where I find life. This is the direction I'm going in. This is where my spirit is happy. And I have to sort of let go of trying to prove myself or find that happiness in an arena that is more about what other people think than what is in me, what is my own dharma. That's also Saturn in Aries, right? Power, will, strength flowing through us also means that sometimes we have to learn to redirect in a way that is more conducive to our authentic selfhood. And Saturn in Aries will say, are you struggling to find that life, that freedom, that happiness, that power of life in just the wrong space with the wrong people? And no matter how good you get at being confident or not shying away, or, that all of those tensions you play with, how meaningful are they if it's not even the right arena to begin with? So some of my reflections, I would love to hear yours. What was happening between those years of spring to 96 to like spring of 99? What kinds of challenges were you facing? Add something to the list if there's something I missed. Would love to hear from you guys. I hope you're having a good one. Tomorrow we will visit the sun trining Pluto while Mercury conjoins Uranus, a big transit over the weekend that we'll take a look at before we finish for the week. All right, after I sign off right now, there's an informational video about year one. Come study with us. Diving deeply into astrology is so transformative personally. And then for many people, you'll find that you actually may have the talent and skill to help other people with this beautiful language. So consider studying with us, and I hope to see some of you there soon. Okay, bye. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It is our first-year course in Hellenistic astrology that begins at the end of June. June 22nd is our starting date. I'm going to take you over to the course page to tell you more about the program and what you will learn while you are in it. So here we go over to the Nightlight Astrology website. You can find this at nightlightastrology.com. Click on the courses tab, go to the first year course. Now, this program is ideal for people who maybe have a little bit of background already in astrology. Maybe you've done some studying on your own independently, taken some courses or webinars and workshops, but you're looking to deepen your understanding of astrology. And maybe Hellenistic astrology in particular has been calling to you. I'll tell you more about what Hellenistic astrology is in a minute, but on the first year course page, you're going to find everything that the course includes. I want to make the structure of the course clear first, and then at the end, I'm going to tell you 5 reasons that I think anyone might have for studying astrology, and you can see if you check any of those boxes. First of all, there are 30 classes on the year. It's just a little under a year-long program with 30 webinars. Every webinar is 2 to 3 hours long, including a lively Q&A and conversational section after we finished our lesson for the day. Each of those lessons I lead personally through live webinars, so you can attend those live. If you want to follow along at your own pace in your own time, on your own schedule, you can always look at the recordings and take those in. And I'm going to show you what the class page looks like so you can see how you can interact with the course as uniquely and creatively as you want to. But you can either attend the live webinars or listen to the recordings or audio or video. In between major units of study within those 30 classes, we have separate classes outside of the 30 classes that are essentially tutoring sessions led by our staff, our course directors. We have 3 of them for our first year program, 3 tutors that help me guide every single class you're in and lead study sessions, and are also staffing an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions, look at charts, practice what you're learning with all of your classmates and with tutors there to help you. They'll always answer questions within a business day. So it's a really well-staffed, well-structured program. In between those major units of study and the breakout sessions, we also have guest speakers that come in throughout the year that you get free access to. The recordings are archived for you in your class folders. So you're getting people within our curriculum. And you're also getting to visit with some astrologers who are outside of the Nightlight School, but we really admire their work, and so we bring them in. You also have a ton of bonus material. With every lesson, we have recommended quizzes, study guides, optional reading. And that allows people who are really, really, intense, deep, like studious types to go as far as you want to with the material, while other people who are maybe, content to take things in at, just kind of taking in the classes, that's there for you too. So you can kind of go as deeply as you want to. The class, if as the year goes on, goes through major units of study in ancient Hellenistic astrology. So if you're not familiar with ancient Hellenistic astrology, this is the earliest form of horoscopic astrology. This is where the astrology that you've probably learned today comes from originally. And that makes some of its features unique. Like, for example, ancient astrologers utilized whole sign houses. We study why they used whole sign houses, how they used them, and we study the why behind really everything: houses, signs, planets, aspects, dignities, essential and accidental dignities, delineation approaches. How do you read and predict within a natal chart? All of those theoretical areas of astrology, we not only learn how to do, but we learn the why behind it. And this is what I think people find most empowering about the course, is that ancient astrology really helps to give you the rationale for everything so that you have the insight available to go off script. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you're learning about a sign, Aries or Taurus or a Gemini, something like that. Ancient astrology won't just give you a list of the adjectives or keywords or descriptions of, say, a sign or a planet. It will give you an underlying philosophical explanation that then allows you to extrapolate from it the kinds of lists that you read in textbooks, which means you'll have an understanding of why everything on a list in a textbook is there in the first place. And you'll also have the insight and creativity available to add things to the list that are a part of your own unique intuition and contribution to astrology. And this is what ancient astrologers wanted students of astrology to learn: the why behind everything. So this is a class where, even though you're seeing things like planet signs, houses, dignities, aspects, and you're like, oh, I've already learned about those things. Not if you haven't studied Hellenistic astrology. I don't mean to sound condescending, but like, truly, most people's experience coming through this program is, wow, I had no idea all that I didn't know about the roots of everything that I've understood thus far about astrology. So it really is about digging into the philosophical core of why we do everything. And then you have greater intuitive and creative capacity as an astrological craftsman or craftswoman. So anyway, that's a brief explanation of why I think Hellenistic astrology is important. Not to mention that ancient astrology was really focused on our ability to accurately describe and predict things in the realm of karma, fate, and destiny, whereas modern astrology's hallmark and strength is psychological depth. And so when you put the two together in our program, which is why it's called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, I think you have something really special. So on that note, you can see everything that we cover here. So there's a video with some of our alumni you can watch. Everything is there on the page. Now, there are 5 reasons that I want to touch on briefly before I tell you about your payment options and need-based tuition. These are 5 reasons to study astrology that, if you mark any of these boxes, especially if you mark several of them, then I think it's a good indication that you might be ideal for this program, might be an ideal fit. So the first one is, if you find that astrology has become a part of your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly spiritual practice, it is a part of how you lead an inner life, then there is nothing more empowering than deepening your connection to that language, because that puts you more in the driver's seat. It's always good to have astrologers that you rely on, teachers that you listen to, get a little objective perspective, especially when you're looking at your own chart through a reading. But there's really nothing more empowering than learning to speak the language at a deeper level for yourself. And if that calls to you, if you want
to understand things and be able to speak more confidently and clearly about this sacred language that you love. And this is a great reason to take a structured program. Number two is that you feel called to read charts for people. And look, not everyone who takes our programs is on a professional track, but we have 4 years worth of professional training programs at Nightlight that will prepare you to read professionally for others if that's the path that you're on. Maybe you don't even know if you're on that path. That's fine too. Many people take our programs just for the sake of their own personal enrichment. And again, to be kind of more in the driver's seat with respect to your astrological journey. You have more of an understanding. You can be more confident in reading symbols and experiencing transits with your own understanding that you've cultivated. But sometimes people want to read for other people. This will definitely set you up to do that. We have a certification track where you can take exams at the end of every year. They're optional. You don't have to if you're not on that level of interest. Number three, you have done a lot of self-study. You've heard things from here and there, but you're looking to bring it all together. It is overwhelming to study astrology on your own. So if you want organization, structure, and coherence, what you're getting in this program is going on 15 years of training astrologers, 15 years of developing curriculum that has in mind the overwhelm that many people experience. And this program is structured year 1, year 2, year 3, however far you want to go with our curriculum, to give you an organized, structured, coherent way of understanding the history and language of astrology from both ancient times to modern times in all of the vastness that the field includes. And also, as we go, we want to give you the confidence that you are a part now of an astrological lineage. Astrology has always been practitioner-based. Coming through Nightlight, you are going to have the opportunity to feel aligned with a lineage. If you like my work, if you feel aligned with the way I speak the language, then this might be a good reason to come study with us. Now, if you're seeking the why behind things, if you're like, yeah, that's interesting, I get it, I understand, but why? Why signs? What's the difference between a sign and a house? Why do they ever come up with a sign and a house? What's the distinction philosophically? Why does Mars represent this? Why does Mars in this sign represent that? If you are someone who feels empowered by understanding the why behind things, you are going to love this program, because that's how I am as a teacher. That's how I am as a person. And that's what this program is really all about. Number 5, you are looking for astrological community. Look, I think Nightlight is unique in terms of the kind of warmth, acceptance, safety, and inclusiveness that our community includes intellectually, spiritually. We are really pride ourselves on being a peaceful kind of family. I'm a Cancer, right? So it's kind of a family-oriented environment. So anyway, I will end it there. If you check any of those boxes, you may want to consider studying with us. Now, I'm going to take you over to 2 things. I want to show you the dashboard. So here is the Thinkific page. You're going to join this. And on your dashboard, you're going to find any courses that you've enrolled in at Nightlight. And there are many, so you may end up in being involved in multiple courses. And you'll find that they're all there on your dashboard. Click on one of them and it will take you in. You're going to find that on the left-hand side, there's orientation instructions, course information, class links, and calendar, all the technical stuff you need to know when you join the course. And then you're going to find that when you go through the lessons, that the lesson includes the video, the audio, the slides, the transcripts, the Q&A box text if you couldn't make it live and see what people were talking about, flashcards, homework, a bonus PDF with all sorts of additional recommended reading, bonus videos, additional video links for bonus material. So every single time that you want to visit something within the course, everything is nicely organized. So you can see here, I'm going to pause this before it starts going, but you can embed the video right there. It's embedded and you can watch it. And then if you wanted to, you could also, right here, you could also download the video and watch it on your own device. And that's same for the audio as well. And then as you go, you'll see all of the lessons are laid out. The study sessions are also recorded if you can't make those live. So everything is nicely arranged on the website for you. And that makes it a course that if you wanted to take 3 years to accomplish, you could take 3 years to accomplish. If you want to take it for the sake of getting certified, you have the full year plus an additional year to take the exam. So, 2 years total that we give people if you're on a professional track. But most people complete the program in a year. And a lot of people, over 50% of our students go on to our year 2 and then our year 3 and horary programs as well. Now, final thing I'm going to show you is right here. You're going to find Here is the enrollment options at the bottom of the first year course page. Again, this is at nightlightastrology.com, and you're going to click on the first year course, go to the bottom. The early bird payment saves you several $100s off the cost of the course. That's available till May 15th. Early bird installment plan saves you on the installment plan, regular cost of the course. That's also only available until May 15th. And then need-based tuition. All of our programs include a need-based option where we give you a sliding scale and we say, you pick your monthly tuition number within this sliding scale, which is greatly reduced off the normal tuition price. That is for people who are on a fixed or limited income, receiving disabilities, single mom, whatever the case might be. We want to make sure that nobody's priced out of studying astrology. So you don't have to feel any shame. If that is you, if you need help, if you want to take this, but you need to make it work within a tight budget, we get it. Times are tough right now. We don't think people should be priced out of studying a sacred subject like astrology. So we've been offering need-based pricing for 15 years. Nightlight is a donation-based school. It started that way. We have a sliding scale, so it's kind of like donation. You get to choose your rate anyhow. So if that's something that will help you, please use it. Thank you for listening to this. I hope it gave you a really deep and comprehensive introduction to what the course is all about and why you might find it exciting to come study with us starting at the end of June. So any questions you have about the program as you're visiting the course, email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. We'll be glad to talk about anything that you have questions about. We are here and we have a wonderful staff of people at Nightlight who will be a part of your learning experience and are all glad to help you. All right, that's it. We'll see you again later. Bye.